light over the last several years, and it is an important point, I think, to make at this moment for this project, is that the light shining on questions about market demand, the cost to utility customers, and Dominion's unfounded arguments for job creation, that light is getting brighter. And we've been doing, the Southern Environmental Law Center has been working at the State Corporation Commission in Virginia.
I want to follow up with Deborah.
As well, working at the State Corporation Commission here in Virginia, as well as at the Public Utilities Commission in North Carolina, to really get at these issues related to costs to consumers, cost to utility customers, market demand, and job creation. And to discuss those issues in more detail, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Will Cleveland.
Thanks, Greg. This is Will Cleveland. I'm a staff attorney with the Southern Environmental Law Center. I'm based in Charlottesville, Virginia. We've been doing a lot of work on the Atlantic Coast Pipeline in a lot of different fora. My work has been focused on the ratepayer impacts through the Virginia State Corporation Commission. And the State Corporation Commission comes into play because of the way that Dominion and Duke have structured their deal to shift all risk of the pipeline development project from their shareholders onto their utility customers. And everything I'm going to say is something that we laid out in a letter to the Governor Northam in Virginia, his administration, earlier this week. So Dominion and Duke are both holding companies, and in Virginia, the Dominion Energy Holding Company wholly owns the regulated utility, Virginia Electric Power. It also is a co-venture in Atlantic Coast Pipeline, LLC. When Atlantic Coast Pipeline wanted to get permission from FERC to exercise eminent domain, take people's property, and build the pipeline, they had to demonstrate to FERC that there was a market need for that pipeline. What they did, instead of actually going out and doing a market survey and figuring out what people who needed gas would do, is they actually just signed contracts with their affiliated entities, specifically their affiliated regulated utilities, who have captive customers. They then took those contracts basically with themselves to FERC and said, here is our evidence that there's an actual market for the pipeline. And FERC has so far accepted the contracts among these utilities as evidence of need, and that is the basis for which they issued the certificate. But the State Corporation Commission in Virginia plays a critical role here because that is the mechanism by which the regulated utility shifts all of its costs onto its customers through an annual proceeding called the fuel factor. And we have done a lot of litigation at the State Corporation Commission and have had opportunity to engage in some discovery. And through that discovery process, we've learned some very compelling facts. First is that Dominion, the regulated utility, has signed a multi-year, multi-billion-dollar contract with its affiliated Atlantic Coast Pipeline entity, even though Dominion admits it has never actually done a study of whether it needs the Atlantic Coast Pipeline to operate its power plants. We have further gotten concessions and admissions from the regulated utility here in Virginia that they pass on the cost of those pipeline contracts to their customers regardless of how much they actually use those pipeline contracts. And moreover, through discovery, we have determined, and we've submitted expert testimony on this, that the pipeline contract that Dominion has signed on the Atlantic Coast Pipeline will actually increase customer costs by about $2 billion. And that $2 billion is relevant because all along, Dominion has claimed that the Atlantic Coast Pipeline would save their customers money and that those customers would then reinvest the money that they've saved, which would produce new jobs and economic growth throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. If there are no savings, there is no job growth and there is no economic growth. Well, our analysis shows that there are no savings. It's actually a net cost to customers. So what you're left with, in Virginia at least, is a regulated utility using its captive customers to bear all the risk of a multi-billion-dollar boondoggle that the utility has never studied whether it needs it, and the utility is going to make customers pay for it regardless of whether they ever use it.
Will, thank you. We are ready to open it up for questions.